Hey, sophomore history team. This is lesson 2 in unit 1. Lesson 2 focuses on geography. I know we're doing the three main topics like at our own order, but I decided to make the final assignment religion just because that was the one I could think of the coolest assignment for. So here's lesson 2 though, geography, which is actually highly inspired by some of the stuff that Francesca put on the overall lesson doc. So thank you, Francesca, and you'll see your own work come up in here more towards the end. So for the lesson objective, like I said, we have the same exact order. So lesson objective, key terms, agenda. There's no real materials because the students make their own materials for this one. I'll get into that later though. The lesson objective, I'll be able to determine how geography impacts the political, social, and economic makeup of societies by viewing and interacting with the documentary, which is going to be Guns, Germs, and Steel. That's where Francesca comes in. Next up, key terms. We talk about geography and geopolitics, which we talk about geopolitics a little bit more in the initial like 2 side activities before the main activity, which is Guns, Germs, and Steel. So as you can see in the agenda, we have the intro activity, Draw the World, which feeds into the second activity, which is a map discussion on this map of Ming China. Then we go to some documentary viewing with just 4 questions, and then we have a final class discussion on the documentary. I'll just go straight into the activities. So the first one is an intro discussion to Draw the World. It's really simple and it might seem kind of pointless to your students, but the fruitfulness of this activity comes from the discussion. But at the beginning, all they have to do is get out a piece of paper and not using any other sources, draw a map of the world to the best of their ability. I've actually just did this yesterday. We spent about 6 minutes on it, and this was actually a really good activity. But so as soon as they get the shapes of their countries down, they're going to label nations, rivers, mountains, lakes, forests, and oceans on their map, and they have to be prepared to share their drawings. Here are the questions we have after this little 5 to 6 minute period, which I also drew my own map, so that was pretty fun to compare my map to my students. But the first question I had, what areas and terrain features were included on your map, which were largely forgotten? So this is just a simple like examination of their map question. For the discussion, I pull up a map of the real world, and then they get to hold it up to their map of just like the normal world, or to their created world that they drew. So I just pull up a picture of just a standard map in on Google Maps. So just a simple observation. The second one though, which nations or regions of the world were included on your map, which were largely forgotten? Again, kind of like the first question, just kind of analyzing their map or just like making discoveries from their map versus the regular map, not really anything too in-depth. The final question is where the in-depth part of the discussion and fruitfulness of the discussion comes in. What might your omissions and inclusions indicate about your perception of the world? We had a lot of varying answers for this one, but overall people were like, I never visited these certain areas. I don't have much knowledge about these certain areas. The place that was really forgotten was like Southeast Asia. A lot of people's maps weren't very good for that. Where are some other bad areas? Oh, like Oceania, that was not very labeled very well, which me included. So yeah, we kind of talked about how where we're from, our history, our background, and the types of lives we live will force us to have less of a good perception about these areas of the world that aren't directly related to kind of the United States, and we don't interact with those areas of the world. But then this, like I said, this activity feeds into this activity, the map discussion, the map of the world from Ming China from 1389. So this is a map, as I said, from Ming China from 1389. And basically it's just what they thought the map of the world looked like, the Ming Chinese. And they're really skilled cartographers, as I was telling my students. So it's kind of interesting to try to figure out why their map looks so different from the modern map of the world. And again, some of these first questions are just kind of simple, but then the last question, question number 3, is going to be a little bit more complicated. So the first one, how does this map of the world differ from the one you created? Obviously, the students had like a lot of things to say. They were like, this map had a lot more details, but overall is less accurate. Which factors might account for these differences? A lot of my kids were talking about, they're really into like how the Earth slightly changes over time. But then I like prompted them. I was like, oh, what kind of technologies have changed? And they're like satellites, phones. So then I kind of talked about a little bit about globalization and how the spread of knowledge is a little bit easier through these technologies. So people overall have a better perception of what the world looks like than Ming China back in the day. But then the final question and the most important one is, how might the Ming Chinese view our world different how might the Ming Chinese view of the world differ from your own based solely on evidence from this map? So yeah, people were saying a lot of things like they thought very highly of themselves because they put themselves in the middle of the map and they thought that this was the only part of the world. A lot of them just thought that their worldview wasn't as wide spanning as our worldviews today. But then I pulled up a picture of the map and kind of showed them like right in the center of the map, and I'm so bad. I can't believe I can't remember the prime meridian, or the one that crosses the world into half vertically, and how that line goes straight through the UK, which was really responsible for a lot of the maps in the modern map today. So how the UK kind of put themselves at the center of the world is not that much different than how Ming China put themselves at the center of the world. Because like over here is like India, over here is Korea, over here is Japan, but smack dab in the middle is China, and it has the most detail. So that was good. We were just kind of talking about how maps can tell a story. It was a pretty fun side activity, kind of touching on geography. But yeah, and then the final activity, which we haven't gotten into yet, is a documentary on guns, germs, and steel. It's just part one. I have these 4 sample questions. I found some of these questions online, but then I clarified some of them to make them a little bit more easy to understand. And there's a lot online. I decided to break it down to just these 4 questions, kind of having the contract with my students that although there are only 4 questions, there could have been like 9, and I reduced it to 4, meaning that I want your answers to just these 4 questions to be really good because I'm asking you to write less. But these do cover the main ideas that I want to talk about in our geography lesson. So what does Diamond believe has allowed some countries to take over others and become rich and powerful? I don't know if everyone's seen Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, but kind of using the idea of geographic determinism and his concept of geographic luck to kind of explain how civilizations have succeeded. So I kind of asked them about geographic luck and then also giving an example. And then also for the geography part, how does the domestication of animals help people develop their societies? And then finally, how did the movement of early civilizations of the Fertile Crescent further support Diamond's idea that geography played a key role in the success of a civilization? So they're really going to be using a lot of these 3 questions to answer this final question and give more specific details as the documentary goes into this kind of, what's it called? Not an experiment, like a case study that kind of highlights why his theory is correct or why he thinks it's correct. And of course, I'm sure my students might not totally agree with his theory. I don't myself, but we can have some fun and talk about this stuff at the end. Basically, we watch the documentary. You can watch it in class. You can give them some time to watch it at home. They should answer the questions, and then when you guys come to class, then you can kind of talk about this stuff, these 4 questions. And this is the final thing I have them turn in. Basically, they just make a notes page, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they just answer these 4 questions at home and then during the discussion, and that's the final thing I collect to make sure that they're participating and being agents in their own knowledge. But again, this is just a suggestion. You guys can do whatever you want with this lesson. I'm including all of my lessons into a master doc with video explanations and also links to everything. So by the time that, well, you guys will be able to see that. I'll send it to you in an email by that time. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions and have a good one.